So you have wheat, you have barley, you have cattle were domesticated there, you have pork, you have sheep, peas, figs, dates, pomegranates. Just an incredible amount of food was selectively cultivated there, improved over the years, and then, wouldn't you know, eventually the alphabet popped up there, and then the pyramids of Egypt, and eventually Islam, Christianity, Buddha was somewhere nearby. So all of the world religions, Western culture, all started in the Fertile Crescent. Not all of it, but I mean a lot of it did. And it had to do with there being an abundance of food, and humans could do something other than hunt. They could do something other than just basically survive. So wherever you see an abundance of cultivated food, you will see a rise in culture. You'll see, rice in Asia gave rise to an incredible culture. Wheat and barley, like I said, in the Fertile Crescent. And for us, very specifically in the Americas, what it is corn. Maize, corn. I call it corn. I mean, it is maize. Technically, it's maize. But I call it corn because it's just easier to, I don't know. There's no explanation. People get a visual image immediately when you talk about corn. So the valley is vibrant, like what Jacqueline is saying. We have abundance, and we have this really beautiful culture, but it's not a recent development. And one of the things that I just find absolutely fascinating is that in the 1960s, there was a guy named Richard McNeish. And he started doing some study. Now, his job, or his self-assigned job, what was most interesting to him was to find the origins of farming in the world. The origins of farming in the world. So what he did, he ended up undertaking a dig in Ocampo. Hey, Lois. I'm seeing friends. So he undertook a dig in Ocampo, which is in the state of Tamaulipas, right? And what he found in the state of Tamaulipas near Ocampo in some caves was some of the oldest planting of corn in the Americas. Let me say that again. You know how big the Americas are? They're very big. And the oldest planting of corn that he could find was in Tamaulipas, right here. So we're just right there. I mean, I think if I started walking from here, I could probably be there in about 2 days. So if I was an indigenous person, I could very well do that. Now, so again, it is not a recent development that we are as vibrant and as populated as we are now. It is not a recent thing. And I have a map. I can't share it with you right now because I don't have any audio-visual capabilities right now. But I have a map from a history book of Tamaulipas, and it was listing, and I think that this was transcribed from someone who observed these tribes somewhere around like 1744, and he counted 300 tribes along the Rio Grande. And I don't mean all the way up to El Paso, I mean just along our 4-county area. So 300 tribes. What was really interesting, though, was a lot of them derived their names from what they ate. Y'all have heard of the come crudos, obviously. But there were like the come perros. There were some called the mapaches. We know what they were eating. Well, the come perros, if you don't know, it means dog eaters. And the mapache is a raccoon. So you pretty much figure out, and then the whole state of Tamaulipas, the name Tamaulipas means people with olive skin. It does not mean that they were eating olives. I have read that before, because olives are native to the Fertile Crescent, not to Tamaulipas. So, but it was people with olive skin. So the people of olive skin, they were the come crudos and the mapaches that all lived along the border, and there were the first planting of corn in Ocampo. Now, if I walked north on through El Paso, just over the border into New Mexico, you will come to a place called, I kid you not, La Cueva del Pendejo. I kid you not. So Richard McNeish started another dig at Pendejo Cave. I have to say this over and over again, and I am so sorry, but it's kind of funny. But so Richard McNeese undertook another dig at Pendejo Cave, and what he found, okay, sorry, I've got to stop myself. If you know anything about history, you know that there is something called Clovis culture. And Clovis culture, it is a dig that happened, somewhere starting around 1927. And it indicated that the oldest indigenous culture that we could find in the Americas happened in Clovis, New Mexico. And so they dated it to about like 13,000 years ago, okay? So if Ocampo was, I think it was 8,000 years ago, Clovis was 13,000 years ago, get it? Pendejo Cave, 31,000 years ago. Completely blew up Clovis, blew up the whole idea of being just 13,000 years ago at Pendejo Cave. I find it hilarious. But that is just up the river. All of that happens because of the Rio Grande. All of that happens in this area because of the Rio Grande running parallel to the Continental Divide. What runs along the Continental Divide? What originally ran around the Continental Divide before humans, and not elves, and not fairies, and not aliens. It was wildlife. Because if you had the Continental Divide, before that you had the Cretaceous Seaway. This Cretaceous Seaway receded, became the Continental Divide. All of that watershed became a great attractive area for wildlife, great attractive area for hunter-gatherers. Great attractive area for people who wanted to farm and wanted to trade. So the old world, they have their Fertile Crescent. The new world, the Americas, we have our Continental Divide. We have this trade route. We have this food superhighway. And what is at the very end of it before it dumps out into the Gulf of Mexico? Rio Grande Valley. So this is a convergence spot for the indigenous, very historically, very importantly, of global importance. And it's great that people like Jacqueline have picked up on that, because that vibrancy in a food scene is still happening today. It has happened since Pangea, since the Cretaceous Seaway, since the Continental Divide, since the tribes. You know, no wonder all of the people who landed at Plymouth Rock in 1622, no wonder they were starving, because all of the food was over here. They had to wait until the indigenous tribes who had traded corn and who had traded all of the Solanaceae family, tomatoes, potatoes, tobacco, chile, eggplant. No wonder they had to wait to be provided something, because the land really wasn't providing them anything. The land that provided is right here. And it's still here. So I could have talked a lot about colonization and the stress and it's a pretty terrible story. It's a little tough to talk about, but I wanted to talk about the geology and the weather with you, because we are talking about farming. And the one thing that the colonists could not bring with them was geology and weather. So if you get a chance, go Google it tonight. Go look up the Cretaceous Seaway, and you will see this massive body of water that runs where the Continental Divide is today. And at the very end of it is the Rio Grande Valley, where all of that silt and all of that water all drained to, and where all of the indigenous gathered, because there was a lot of wildlife, which we still have, a lot of deer hunters out there, a lot of quail, a lot of dove. It all came to this point. So that is the amount of history that I wanted to share with y'all today. Don't ever cut the Rio Grande Valley short in terms of our global importance of food, because we've got it in spades.
Thank you so much for that.
My pleasure.
Part of, and I think this is where a lot of us in this room have to make this choice, is years ago you had to eat seasonally due to survival, right? You had to, those indigenous tribes would move to the coast and then move back inland, in this idea of how they were following their food, right? Last night we were able to screen would be the word, the movie Common Ground, and there was a very large section of discussing how the way that we save in this idea of climate change, the way that we save our earth is going back to the way that the indigenous people of the Americas ate and the way that they took care of the land and the way that they, allowed it to provide for them and be in balance. And so I think for most of us, it's going back to those choices in finding out what is seasonal, finding out what is having the least impact on your community from, it coming from California, the broccoli that you're eating is coming from down the road versus coming from California in that context. And so from that, I'm curious of the economic impact of food on our culture and how those in the audience can potentially make small choices and how that impacts everybody.
So it's for me.
Yes, sorry.
So good morning, thank you. As you know, I teach business, but I love my community. I am from Tamaulipas, but I have lived here for over 30 years. So I'm very interested in economic prosperity for everyone in our community. I believe education is number one. So things like what we are doing here today really bring awareness. But I also understand that there is an issue with access. We might have plenty of everything, but there is no equal access for everybody. So because of that, we become marginalized when it comes to access to healthy food, for example. And one of the things that we have seen, of course, has been the fact that the valley is growing and we have a huge enthusiasm for food. So restaurateurs, food trucks, which is something that we used to not have once that administration changed and we were able to access permits for food trucks, it really became a hub for entrepreneurs. All of the economic impact that comes from the food industry, from people really making choices about where they're eating. Now, one thing that is plainly and hurtfully clear is that not everybody is going to have the same access to healthy choices of food. There are many different things that have to do with that. For example, we all know that we are the most obese population in the country, in the most obese country in the world. So that is not a good label for us to have. We also know that we have the highest diabetes rate in the state, for example, but that it is not a coincidence that we also have the highest poverty rate in the state, that we have almost half of our children under 18 live below the poverty line, and that in our Tri-County area, our poverty line, people living under the poverty line stand at 37%, which is huge. So because of that, the choices that we're making in the food that we are purchasing are really, unfortunately, not the right choices. Also, we, a lot of times, just because we know how to cook, just because we are great cooks doesn't mean that we're going to be great at running a restaurant. So we need the education on knowing how we run a business like a business. And having, for example, the university, UTRGV here, I am interested, I teach business, but I'm interested in my students understanding the intersection of food and culture and economic prosperity. So for example, one of the projects that we have right now, along with Chef Marcel, who's now teaching for us at the university, we are helping a small business who is not doing very well right now, that is also a nonprofit, they're a social enterprise, with a business plan, with marketing ideas, with technology that is going to provide accessibility to everybody in the community to their menu. So those are the kind of things that I think that we need to look at because, like I said, unfortunately, due to our economic conditions, not everybody is going to have access to food. Now, I'm also on the board with Proyecto de Desarrollo Humano, which is Sister Fatima. I think that you all, or some of you went yesterday to their amazing, wonderful garden. One of the things that they have is isolation. They are in a very isolated community, and they do have a wonderful garden, but the food is not readily available to all of us in the community. So for example, one thing that they've done, now they have a booth regularly at Tres Lagos Market so that they can come and bring their wonderful vegetables to the community. Something else that they've done is that they have become certified so that the people in the community can buy from the farmers market in in Peñitas through food stamps. So now we don't have to go to the dollar store and buy frozen corn dogs to feed our children. We can go to the farmer market that we have right there in our urban garden and purchase vegetables that we can also bring to the table. Something else is, though, we don't have the education. I don't know how to cook eggplant. I had to teach myself how to do these things, right? So unfortunately, we don't have the right education, and I'm glad that the ISDs are here, because that starts maybe with our new generations. They're the ones that are going to come home and ask for these things. We don't have to have pizza classified as a vegetable in our school lunches because they have tomato paste. We can offer healthier choices to our children, to our youth, so that when they come home and when they grow up, they also make those choices and continue to improve not only our economic outlook, but also our health outlook.
Thank you so much. A lot to unpack there. You loaded it up. You were like, we'll come back to some of those things. But thank you so much. Amazing. I'm trying to make sure I remember. But I wanted to turn it over to Chef Alex in this component of, I was able to eat the delicious food that you had on Thursday night when at the cocktail reception, for those of you that were able to attend. And I thought something that was really interesting in that right now in this idea of sourcing locally, it takes more time and it takes more effort and it takes more dollars, right? So circling back to what Maria was saying in this, like when you are connecting all of the dots in this idea that we are one of the most unhealthiest regions from an obesity perspective in the most unhealthiest country, and then we're one of the most poorest populations. And this idea of procuring locally, it's probably going to be more expensive, or it's going to take you going to 3 farms to serve local tomatoes, right? So if you can kind of unpack your experience as a chef and the effort it takes to source locally.
Yes, ma'am, of course. My name's Alec, by the way, guys. Very honored to be here, talk with you guys, be in a room full of like-minded people and, people trying to make a difference. So this is an honor. No, I think, sourcing food locally is important. And, being in the RGV, they were talking about how we have an environment that allows us to farm almost year round, where there's always something being produced, no matter the season, even in the winter. So I think that that's important to, cook with the seasons and accessing this food. I think it takes certain people that are like, or me, like I want to make sure that you guys get the best quality product, tomatoes, even if it's something as simple as tomatoes. I know the food summit last year, there was a big speech on tomatoes, and they're beautiful. And I think, it's easy to buy store-bought tomatoes, but I want to go out there and see, I was able to get in contact with Selena's family farm. I was able to get in contact with Terra Preta, and all through the Hub of Prosperity is the main farm that, got me started on this and got me down the rabbit hole of like, hey, there's so much food and so much, there's so much opportunity for this. And I think that's where I want to utilize, being a chef and cooking this food to educate people and be like, hey, there's no reason that we should be eating, bad food. Like, why is there a McDonald's on every corner? Why is there Whataburger? Why is there, all these restaurants that are fast food and more? I see the lines at McDonald's and I'm like, that's crazy. Like, why? That shouldn't be like that. There should be, an access. And I want to do my job is that, to be able to provide that and show people, hey, there's this great food out here. And, if I access it and, I want to start a restaurant, I do private caterings and events. And that's, that's my start. And right now, the end goal is to have a restaurant, a full sustainable restaurant off of, the farm. And I want to be able to have my own farm, but also provide or support other farms. So I think that that's, working together as a community and bringing that together is just where I want to come in. And hopefully, I can bring everybody together. I think, like I said, meeting Shakira at Terra Preta, meeting Cruz, the Hub of Prosperity. I already work with Stephanie. I work with Maria. The farmers over there, Katie, Juliet. Meeting these people and the work that I see that they're putting in, it's worth the price. And until we get to a point where we have enough vegetables, staying here, that's going to bring the price down. That's going to allow us to, be more affordable. Have the community can access it more. Hopefully bigger farmers markets, like I know farmers markets are usually only one day a week, Sundays or Saturdays, there's farmers markets, but I think, opening a restaurant and being able to do that is going to bring more business to farms. And when you open up a restaurant or in doing that, you can't just open up a restaurant and say, hey, I'm opening up a restaurant. I need this, 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 and this. You have to plan it with the farmers. You have to, take take that initiative to like, hey, I want to do this. You're already growing this. That's great. I don't want to change what you're doing. I want you to love what you're doing. You're putting in the labor and the time for this, and it's love. People don't do that for a lot of other reasons other than they love what they're doing. And same thing for me. Like I love cooking, so that's and then it's a rabbit hole. You love cooking. I love fresh ingredients. Where do I get these fresh ingredients? Like where does it? Okay, I get it from the farm. Okay, so they're growing these. They're doing experimental trials, figuring out what grows best down here, what tastes best. So I'm just excited to be a part of it, and I think that's where I can come in. And
Love it.
this
Love
way.
the passion. And I think your dream is a reality here, right? Like we do have examples of chefs that have taken small incremental steps to grow their own food, start serving that food to a consumer, and then have, whether that's starting in a food truck and starting small, starting in a catering business, and then eventually opening something that's brick and mortar. So we know there is proof, right? There's proof that it's possible, with all the barriers that we've already discussed on this stage, right? So, and I think that is, how many people here shop at farmers markets? Right? It's probably like a loaded question here because it's the perfect market. And so it's like having everyone here, commit to taking a friend to a farmer's market and having them, buy a H-E-B cucumber and a farmer's market cucumber and tasting it side by side, and the understanding of why it tastes different, right? That cucumber had to be picked probably 4 weeks ago to get to your H-E-B versus the farmer's market cucumber that you're picking was picked that week. So there's a very big difference in the nutrients and all of the components that are going in to the locally sourced ones. Plus, my allergies are crazy today. And so the local vegetables and honey help with that, right? So a question that I have for the whole panel, and feel free, whoever would like to take it first, is kind of this idea of how keeping all the scents locally, right? And how that grows a local economy, and the components of how our local culture hinder it and also work for it, right? And I think that's something with a lot of what Maria was talking about. There's the governmental component of how that can help in this idea that food trucks at one point weren't allowed in our communities, but they are very much a small step to a local entrepreneur to start serving their community and serving food to their community. So I'm loading this question up a lot, so let's move it back a little bit. So how does food grow a local economy, and what does that look like, would be my question. I don't know who wants to take it first.
Okay, so I think, to answer your question, I think celebrating regionalism in our cuisine is really, really important. I mean, if somebody came up with something like lobster tamales, I mean, that is not regional in the least. But I mean, we have the East Coast, they have lobster, that's wonderful. But we really need to celebrate our own local flavors and make the best of them. We have our own beautiful local Tex-Mex cuisine. And, people, when I've made barbecues outside of the valley and I don't have my mesquite wood, it is just not as good. We have regional ingredients, and mesquite I count as an ingredient because it flavors so profoundly, and it is the original heat source that would have been here in the valley. It's such a profound flavor that, I mean, whatever we do, I mean, forget the lobster, just go full on mesquite, but just celebrating our regionalism, I think is the best way to attract more attention. And, just like New Orleans does, they have their own flavor. They're not doing anything mesquite over there, as far as I know. I mean, they're doing their own thing. If we do our own thing, we stay the course, I think that is terrific. I think one of the things, though, that kind of squashed our regional flavor so sorry to say this, but, the frozen food trucks that come in, the mom and pops stopped cooking because they didn't need to. It was not economically in their best interest to make their own French fries or make their own, what have you, tortillas, or, everything became bought off of a truck. It's really hard to run a restaurant. I mean, a restaurant is a business, you have to make things pay. But we did lose a little bit of our regionalism when we started buying off of frozen food trucks. So, but sticking to our regionalism, though, I think it will help grow our food economy.
And I would tackle that in this perspective of how we celebrate that regional has changed over time. And I think the way that it's changed over time is the ingredients that are being used, right? The ingredients that are being used to make those tortillas, or the frequency in which we choose to eat tamales year round versus at holidays, right? So there are the pros and the cons with that. And sometimes it takes someone to zoom out a little bit to both celebrate it and then create balance within it a little bit. But Maria, you had something?
Yes, so I think that's something that helps us, and we see it all over the valley, is the fact that we have very large extended families, and we like to support our own. So if our cousin has opened a food truck or a restaurant, of course we're gonna go buy from them and support them. We do that with everything in business here. And that is something good, right? Because we are supporting our own and we are growing local economy. I think that with the restaurants themselves, I think one thing that really should help would be having more of a collaboration also with government institutions so that we have the right compliance and the right oversight of what is being done, but also education to where we can, like Chef Alec is saying, where can we buy and procure local supply of products so that we can continue to educate our family, our extended family that is coming to our restaurants, that they can eat something that is fresh and it's local, not so much things that are just frozen or just fast food like we see so many people doing.
Yeah.
No, I was just gonna chime in on that. I'm learning a lot from you too, by the way, Melissa, Maria. But funny how you were saying you were talking about mesquite. I've had the opportunity to cook with mesquite. I used to run a barbecue food truck, smoked with mesquite and a little bit of hickory, but I love the mesquite. You can't beat that smoke, and nothing comes compared to it. But also the utilization of mesquite honey, the beans, the pods from the mesquite, making flour from the mesquite pods. I did a catering not too long ago where I did mesquite, dark chocolate mesquite like cookies. And, you can make, the mesquite flour is so versatile and gives such a flavor. I think that, we have all this delicious stuff locally, why not just take advantage of everything, I think it's just, and then also, I lost my, there we go. Yeah, that was right. But I was like, you mentioned mesquite earlier, and I think, using everything here, utilizing 100% of what we've got, smoking the wood or grilling, a heat source for anything that we cook, and then the honey, getting the pods, making flour, doing this, allows you to get, that's just 3 components of mesquite, and I'm sure there's plenty more coffee. I think we've had mesquite coffee. There's so much different things, and I think if we can capitalize on that, show the community that, I would love to, that's where I want to come in as a chef and educate people. Hey, we have this stuff here, and I just want to showcase everything.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I have to say, our mesquite issue is downstairs. We did it last year. And to learn about the tree that grew up in my front yard, right? The tree that grew up in my front yard that I never knew was food. I'll be very honest. I come from French descent, so I'm Mexican by association, but because I grew up here, but I grew up with a French father that taught us we weren't allowed we were allowed 1 week a year to buy, processed food, to buy Coke, to buy the sugary cereals. It was 1 week a year we were able to do that. So we were always jealous. And then when I left to school, I realized that the fresh smoothie he made every morning for me was a gift. So it's an interesting shift that you do that took a lot of commitment from him, and he got a lot of grief from me and my 3 sisters. But to learn locally of what's in your backyard and what you have, and then to support those local individuals like Capadona Farms, or there's a gentleman out in Los Fresnos that's making mesquite coffee. And the branding's amazing, right? So it's like all of those little things and connecting all of those little dots, I think over time helps us support everyone and promotes our culture. And in time will eventually also impact our health, I think, right? Like I'm being very idealistic up here, painting a very dreamy picture. But I think it does take all of us to take these conversations out into our communities and continue telling the stories. So I know we have to move on to our Q&A session. So I'll say, for the three of y'all up here, what do you feel is one next step that you feel yourself or someone out in the audience can do to both promote local food and our culture? Anyone?
I was like, that's all the eyes come to me. I was like, okay, I'll start this. I think, well, for me, I think, I want to keep pushing, when I do these caterings, right now it does, like, I mentioned earlier, it does get expensive, doing that. But like I said, I think the price is worth it. And for now, if I have to take that, that little bit of, of a hit, it's, it's not a problem. It's not a problem to me. And I think, going forward, I just want to keep learning about new farms and keep, seeing what's out there. I know there was a gentleman earlier, I don't know if he's here right now, saying that he was trying to, he was starting to grow. And, I think it's great. I think it's amazing that, the school districts are getting in on it. It's important for the students. My son's 7 years old, and, I try to give him, a taste of everything I cook. He's my little taste tester, I think, just getting that out there to the students, getting that out there to anybody and everybody who's hungry. Everybody has to eat. So, why not eat delicious, local food? And why not, it came
What's
from
the
here.
name of your catering company?
Right now it's Chef Alec Private Events and Catering. I just go, it's just my name. Nothing too fancy, nothing too fancy, but I've, then the next step for me is, a restaurant. I want to have a restaurant. I want to be able to have a farm. I'm partnering. I want to work with Maria from the Hub of Prosperity, future wife. But anyways, she wants to. She has the farming down, and she's working there and getting all the experience. And we want to collaborate and really be able to have a farm, have a restaurant at the front, have maybe we were talking about having like a market that allows all the farmers here from Los Fresnos, Brownsville. There's so many farmers I haven't even gotten in touch with yet, and being able to have a market and being able to have a storefront for everybody to be able to come and buy that, other than HEB, because I know HEB is doing a good job of trying to get a lot of Texas grown, but it's still hard to do, thousands of pounds of tomatoes and all these different HEBs.
Completely.
And so, I mean, like I said, until we get to there, I just keep trying to do my part and, buy from them and allow them these farms to keep growing and doing things until I have my own. And then when I do have my own, same thing, I want to do educational, have people come in, cooking classes, come in and, take a tour of the farm and be able to pick, we're going to go pick your food for tonight, that we're going to be cooking, and really getting people to the earth and close to the earth, being able to walk along the farm and see that these things grow on vines and they grow up trellises, and these ones, these are bushes, and, we need to, keep these here and rotating crops, and so
everything.
Everything.
We want everything.
We want everything, but it is all one step at a time. So, but I'm just excited for the future, and just want to keep pushing for it.
Well, I'm sure everyone in this room is excited to see how it goes.
Yes,
So
ma'am.
please send us your Instagram or whatever it is so we can follow your journey.
Yes, ma'am.
Ladies, do y'all have an action
I wanna
item
hear-
for everybody?
I want to hear what y'all say.
Education. I mean, of course. What we're doing right here is put together by UTRGV. So the fact that we have collaboration across different communities and different industries in one room makes a huge difference. Now, like I said, I teach business. The first day of my semester is at the farm. Imagine all these business seniors sitting at the farm going, what am I doing here? But I want them to understand that ecosystems occur everywhere, in organizations, in companies, and in the earth. And then when our friends from Hub of Prosperity start talking to them about their challenges with labor and with funding, they understand that it's all part of the journey of becoming not only business people, but business leaders in their community. So you want to have that education happening at all stages, from kindergarten all the way to graduation. Now, I'm very proud that our students, our students are #1 in upper social mobility. So that means that they start a certain level of income before you start, and when you graduate, you go to a much different level of income. So if they're doing that, but they're educated about their food and their body and their health, is going to be so much prosperous economically for everybody. Our health depends on our social and economic conditions as well. So all of it is intertwined.
Totally.
And everything, it's so two things, education and collaboration. If you follow the UN Sustainable Development Goals, number 17 is partnerships for the goals, and that's exactly what needs to happen for us to improve and to keep growing our very rich food culture.
The only thing I have to add is regional pride. And it adds on to what Maria was talking about in terms of education. Like, you have to know what our local ingredients are, you have to know what our local culture and history are, and then tell people about it. I mean, that for me is everything, because we're not, sometimes I feel like the Rio Grande Valley, we're kind of dismissive. You know, it's like it's our sister. We can be
It's normalized.
Yeah, we can be kind of rude to our sister. You know, we're not very nice to it, but we are spectacular because of where our place is in terms of the food history of the Americas. We are a diamond. So I would just get out there and talk about it. Oh, and y'all can follow me on Instagram. It's Kitchen Wrangler, and every Tuesday I have a little bit of food history. I was so surprised. People have really watched my post on pigeons, but they wouldn't watch my post on Fritos. I don't know.
You never know.
Who knows?
Just be yourself, right? At the end of the day.
Priorities.
I think in starting the magazine down here, we're in our 3rd year. The part that was really, really interesting to me is we live our food culture every day. So we almost we've normalized it to almost not realize how special it is. And for me, you know, Edible's a national, it's the largest local food media company in the United States. And all magazines, for the most part, are locally owned and control their content, which I can say we do. And to have other publishers who love local food and they're blown away by the stories we're telling. They're blown away in learning the things that we're just talking about, and we're just being who we are. I mean, I hope we are. Y'all will tell me if we're not. So I hope we are. But yes, I mean, my one thing that I take away is buy local. And so what does that look like, right? I think the idea of someone having a garden in their front yard, or, you know, going to your farmer's market, signing up for a CSA, those are all tangibles. But I think for here, we have to start smaller somehow. And so in this idea of convenience, if you're going to HEB, then start asking them to source locally. And yes, Texas, we can consider Texas locally, but we can also ask for the cilantro that's being grown down the street to be sold at HEB. So starting to have those conversations, starting to buy the local meat that's being made in Lynn, and that's being sold in HEB. So if right now you're still shopping at your local grocery store, then you're making the effort to purchase locally there. And then being able to go out to that small scale farmer on a Saturday or on a Sunday at the farmer's market, and you're doing that. And that even translates when you're eating in restaurants. When you're eating in restaurants, you're asking those questions. You know, what local vegetables are you serving? Am I eating local Gulf shrimp? You know, the Gulf shrimp industry, this is the region for it, and it's suffering. So if you have the dollars and the cents in your pocket to buy it, then I would make sure that you're eating it. Because you'd be surprised that most restaurants aren't making the effort to source it, is what I'll leave with. Any questions? Yes. Oh, if you can turn it on.
Okay, thank you so much for the discussion today. I wanted to ask, I know you mentioned how many of you guys go to farmers markets and how many of you guys shop locally. I live in Alton. I don't go to farmers markets. I am born and raised here in RGV. This is my rinconcito. You know, I consider it perfectito, como Dios lo quiso. But I go to the flea markets. I shop from the person that I know needs my money because it's going to help them put shoes on their kids' feet, right? And I don't want to take away from them. I also go to the people that are, you know, parked in the corner of a street, and I buy from them. And these people are very much, you know, like yesterday, my ex-director, Tania Chavez, was mentioning, they have an entrepreneur spirit, right? And so we don't want to compete with them, and we also don't want to take away from that, because whenever I'm having conversations with them about farmers markets, they say, well, why can't we call it a flea market? Why can't it stay the pulga? You know, where are we in this picture? And they want to improve their situations as well. But, you know, when we're talking about eating from our backyard, I grew up eating from the ranch. I grew up eating from my backyard too. My grandmother was planting and farming when she was 6 years old. And, you know, she came to America through the Braceros program. It was all taken away from her. Her knowledge, she was discredited. You know, everything that she knows, her home remedies, which were the best cures that would heal me much faster than, you know, the doctor. And that, I feel like that's what we need to restore back to our community. We need to, like this conversation today, it should have taken place in a colonia where we could have invited, you know, the ladies that stay home with their kids that are in charge of their nutrition to be part of this. Because my mom, if my mom would be here, she would say, we hardly ever eat out because we don't trust the food that they're selling to us, that fast food. But yet I grew up in America, and you turn on the TV and all you see is McDonald's, Whataburger. You know, you see all of this fast food and you're so attracted to it. And you don't recognize the damage that we're causing to our own bodies until it's too late, right? And so now I've gone back to, you know, beans. Beans is my favorite food. You know, corn, because it's, you know, but I'm already 40 and now I'm trying to teach it to my kids. I think that there's so much that we need to do, but we really need, and I would like to see how we can bring, you know, those moms, those, I mean, they don't have a formal education, but you know what? They know their plants. We know our agriculture. We know it better than anybody else. And so, like, I feel like we need to bring them more into these conversations. We need to see how we can support them so that we can improve these systems, right? Because they already have the foundation. And those moms will tell you, you know, I grew up, I was personally, me, I was on food stamps for 20 years. I couldn't afford to go eat out. Everything that I would cook would come from the stores, but sometimes I didn't even have gas money to go to H-E-B. So I had to go to the corner store and use my EBT card there, but everything there was local as well. And so, I mean, well, it's being, you know, it's coming from somewhere local. But yes, I want, how can we bring these voices, elevate these voices, and give back that dignity and worth to our community? Because yes, our culture, you know, we mastered agriculture, and then it was taken away from us. And now we're the farm workers working in, and we're so discredited. And like yesterday, my leader, Maria Elena, was saying, you know, now we're called unskilled workers. But we have that, all that knowledge. We do, we have it.
So these conversations are happening in the colonias as well. You're absolutely right, but we are working with people in the colonias. Sister Fatima, Lourdes Flores from Arise, Proyecto Azteca, Lupe, all of them are having much deeper conversations than even this, happening in their communities with people, a lot of them from here, also from learning institutions and from government. For example, Sister Fatima, I know because I'm on the board, so I I'm very familiar with what they do. They just got some grants, and they gave hundreds of citrus trees to the families in the colonia, so that they can have citrus in their area. A lot of people are really working to elevate the voices and the needs and understand the needs of people in the colonias, and those conversations are happening, and a lot of action is being taken place. So I completely agree with you. This is a much wider conversation than just the people in this room, but it is happening. And there are a lot of people that are organizing in the colonias, in those communities, because a lot of them, we don't want to call them colonias, right? They're just communities, because we don't want to label anything. And there is an entrepreneurial spirit, and there are a lot of people having conversations and collaborations to make things happen. And you say you're one of them. Congratulations for that.
We have time for one last comment, and I'd like to invite Diana Padilla to say something.
I honestly think that said to myself, I'm not going to say anything, but it's so hard to not say anything. You are right. In the community that Sister Fatima has her half an acre, there's 5 or 6 moms that grow, and the community comes to buy. If we think outside the box, you know how you said the flea market? Those folks go somewhere to buy that to resell. If we created community gardens in all of the areas that we could possibly create those community gardens, maybe they can grow that box or 2 boxes. And now there was maybe just time invested in buying that vegetable that they were reselling instead of buying the vegetables from somebody else and then reselling. So rethinking that same idea, that buying from that same person that got it either from a local farmer or grew it himself instead of somebody else that was probably not even in the U.S.
I just have one comment to add. Write it down. It's really important. I teach chefs how to write, and the first thing I have them write is a personal narrative, and it may not go anywhere, it may go somewhere, who knows, but I can't tell you how many manuscriptos that I get from all over the world, and that information it's gold, it's money. You have to write it down so that the next generation can appreciate it, and then give your papers, scan them, send them to a university or a museum, because it's the only way that we will know. It's super, super important, but God bless you.
Well, thank you. I'd just like to say thank you to the panelists for sharing their wisdom. As well as thank you to the audience, right? I mean, I think these last couple of days, we've tried to create stimulating information to generate discussion. And the truth is, part of the reason why we have the Food Summit is because we're often not always together all in the same room. To have a farmer have a conversation with a food worker advocate, to me, that's part of the reason why we're here. And, you know, you probably noticed there's a great USDA presence here, right? And we've invited them to come as listeners, but also as subject matter experts, people who have also dedicated their careers to thinking and working in these fields, as much as the people on the panelists and in the audience has as well. And we've invited them because we wanted to showcase the cultural richness of the Valley. I think they've all been impressed because they know that this work and this conversation would be happening whether they were here or not. But the truth is we need everyone, right? I mean, food systems everywhere in the world are subsidized in some way. And unfortunately, our current food system is heavily subsidized by folks who dominate the table, and often our voices aren't there to decide, well, how are we going to subsidize our own food, our own agriculture? In a lot of ways, our food that we have today is subsidized by harms to the soil and to the environment. It's subsidized by extractive water use and a lot of pollution. It's subsidized through the input of external fertilizers and pesticides, and it's subsidized through injustices to our farm and food workers, right? So the question is, if food is always subsidized, who now will pay for the good, healthy, fair food that we envision as part of our food system. Part of it is farmers markets. Part of it is intellectual capital. We have to pay for it through intellectual capital. But actually, part of a healthy food system that we envision, some of the ancient models that Melissa talked about, some of the traditional models, they were subsidized by care, by people who cared about their food, where it's from, how it was grown. And that's in part what we're trying to help generate here, is to celebrate all of the care in this room around our food system, be it from how it's grown, who's bringing it to our table, what kind of intellectual capital can we use to support those organizations and institutions that are doing this, what kind of spiritual and guidance can we use to help that sense of stewardship and love for our fellow citizens. And these are the kinds of conversations that we want to continue to have, not just at the Food Summit, but all throughout the year, so that the next time you see each other isn't this time next year at the next year's Food Summit. With that, we wanted to continue our celebration, right? So we will celebrate with food downstairs. Yes, the food is provided from a generous sponsor by Carhartt, and I'm just going to tell you how this happened. The equity officer at Carhartt was a fellow member of the Equity Commission with us. They actually had an equity report roll out 3 weeks ago there, and then as soon as it ended, he called me and said, how can we help? How can we help subsidize these conversations, right? It comes from everywhere. So as you eat your food today, think about how we subsidize that food. I'm telling you, it's really hard to work with hotels to get them to procure local. We've done it in some ways, but it's still a work in progress. As you eat the food, I want you to look around and look at the photo voice exhibits that students have prepared as part of their assignment. Those are 25 students who are part of a sustainable ag class that they've taken this semester. Some of them you guys are going to meet today. And then when you're done eating, we need you to come right back into this room at 12:45. So we won't have that much time to really eat and enjoy. But it's because we've invited the USDA to also participate in this discussion. And she has a very tight schedule. So we want to see it. If you eat, I'm sorry, you're going to have to stay for the conversation. This is not a dine and dash type deal, right? So, but thank you. And we'll see you guys downstairs for lunch.